Let's talk about the next mental skill that a lot of people train. I mean, it's so necessary. The idea of what you're saying to yourself. So your
Yeah.
self-talk at the line and any mantras that we can include that can facilitate a stronger inner dialogue that is going to uplift us and not break us down. Where
Mhm.
does your mind go when helping athletes hone their self-talk at the line?
Right. Well, for me, there's like self-talk is like kind of twofold, and like there's two directions that I think to take it. One is this like ongoing overall like narrative, right? It's the vibe of that we have of ourselves, right? And so I think we tell ourselves stories, we identify information that feeds this narrative, feeds this vibe. And then the second part is that like phrase, word, mantra, whatever it is that like refocuses me onto like this exact task that I'm doing right now, right? And so I think one of the things like we tell ourselves, it's like, hey, I'm a pretty good free throw shooter, like I'm successful at this, and we tell ourselves that all the time in practice. When we think about how we play the game, right? We're not necessarily bragging about it. We're not telling other people, but we're telling ourselves it, right? When in practice, when you're having a free throw shooting contest between you and your teammates or whatever, that there's this vibe, there's this narrative you're telling yourself. It's like, I'm probably going to win this, and like then there's like surprise, then there's some surprise if a teammate beats you. It's like, oh man, I can't. That's weird, because like I'm the best free throw shooter on the team, whether or not stats back that up. But what it is it's the vibe, right? So that when I get fouled in the game, it's not like an oh crap moment or how should I feel about this. It's like, oh, that's great because I'm really good at free throws, right? I think back to so he's playing for the Spurs now. Jakob Pertl played for the Spurs, played at the University of Utah. He was actually in my like psychology of sport injury class in grad school, and we were talking after class one day about free throws and how because he was less confident and believed in himself less, he actually played differently. He played to not get fouled, right? I mean, we could probably do an entire other podcast episode on like the strategy of free throws and the psychology of that. But he played the game to not get fouled because he didn't have the confidence at the free throw line. And so once he with work ethic, absolutely. But once he started changing this idea that he was good at free throws, he played differently. Then it was just like, yeah, dude, I'm going for contact because, dude, I'm a good free throw shooter, right? It was the vibe, it was the narrative that he had created for himself that he was good at this, and so he wanted to shoot a free throw because he was good at that. So that's kind of the first part is kind of this vibe, is this narrative. The second one is the mantra that I think for me is almost like a refocusing thought, right? Like there are these distractions going on, but also, and I think it pairs with like with a deep breath, is almost like a little bit of a transition from how I want to be when I play in basketball to how I want to be when I'm at the free throw line, right? Because when I'm playing basketball, and I think everyone's this way, we want to be playing with energy, we want to be bouncy, we want to be like almost a little bit agitated. I mean, not actually, but like we want to be able to like quick reflexes, right? We want to be able to quick movements and things like that. Not when I'm shooting a free throw, right? And so like I feel like that refocusing word, that deep breath is almost like a little bit of a transitional space and transitional like mental moment for me to be like, hey, like new task, entirely different to the run of the basketball game. This is a new task in front of me where it's just me, fine motor skill, focused on this one thing in front of me. And so, I think as I've helped athletes develop, their mantra, their word, their refocusing thought, I kind of just ask the question of like, tell me why you should be successful. Why should you be successful at a free throw line, right? It's like a lot of times practice. I did this with a high school player that he went on to play Division One, and so this is actually like 6 years ago. And I was actually just talking with him yesterday, and realized that he's still using the exact same phrase that we developed his freshman year of high school. He's now using it as a sophomore playing Division One basketball. And that was so freaking cool to hear. He's like, I still use that. And I'm like, no way. Like you know, I would have imagined you would have moved on from it or changed it or whatever, but it's obviously working like really well for him. But for him, what it is like a phrase that he says to himself that helps him remind him why he'll be successful. And it's tied to like the work that he's put in, right? And so because he's standing at the free throw line and there is that more pressure, there are those things, those other distractions. He needs that, refocusing thought or idea to like increase his self-belief that he will be successful at it. And why will he be successful? Because, and that answer has become his mental cue or the thing that he says to himself.
Which is so effective because naturally the doubt will creep in for
Right.
everybody. And having the awareness, that first skill that we talked about, to catch when that creeps in is the perfect opportunity to counter the doubt of saying, hey, wait a minute, I know I'm good at this. I know my percentage is high. I know I train this all the time in practice and I'm successful there. Boom, that's evidence for why I shouldn't feel as stressed out as I do. And then that stress response goes a little bit down and you feel a bit more confident. And I also want to say I loved that explanation of self-talk, of how there's kind of this big picture narrative of how your self-talk tends to be, but then the self-talk changes depending on the very specific task you're currently engaged in. And when that self-talk is being ineffective, like it's focusing on what the thoughts might be of the crowd or of your coach or parents, that's when you change that specific thought within your own head of going,
Right.
okay, so actually let me give this opportunity to make it even clearer on where or how people can develop their mantra that can be an anchor to refocus on. The most important way I think athletes can use a mantra is create this refocusing word or phrase that is based off of the process. And like we talked about earlier, keep it simple. Don't make it like a a checklist of 8 or 9 items that you want to check off in the process, because you don't have time to be doing that. And that will lead to overthinking as well, or paralysis by analysis.
Mhm.
Keep it to 1 or 2, maybe 3 things max that you can focus on that will lead to a better outcome. And that is a great thing to have at the front of your mind and to constantly come back to give yourself a sense of confidence that the outcome will happen on its own.
Yeah.
So a process-based mantra is important. Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say is, um, I feel like a mantra, like the reason why you have it for like the best free throw shooters is actually to like get your mind out of the way, right? You were talking about that, like simplifying and making sure that there's not too many things, right? Is that like the free throw really comes down, like your brain doesn't shoot the free throw, your body does, right? And that's why work ethic overcomes fear, is because I create muscle memory, I create this routine. It's like, man, like I don't shoot a jump shot the same way I shoot a free throw, right? It's like an entirely different, I mean, not entirely different, but it's a slightly different like variation on the shooting mechanics, right? And so like because it's so fine motor skill, right? And that like my body can do it, right? Like if and the problem comes in is if my mind ever like takes away or focuses too much on what I'm doing, right? And so so sometimes think these mantras and things we say to ourselves just like helps keep our mind occupied
Yeah.
so that our body can just do what we've been rehearsing or we've been practicing for years and years and years. Think of this Division 1 player I was telling you about. His mantra is it's actually like a number sequence, which I know is weird, but he just says it over and over and over again, and not like, but it's like kind of in like pattern. He
Controlled.
says it control, and how many times he says it, I don't know, because it just kind of goes over and over and over, because he knows that he doesn't need to think about how to shoot a free throw, and that was his problem, is he was thinking too much about how to shoot a free throw. So he just has this phrase that he keeps repeating, and he just keeps repeating, and when he gets the ball, he does his like physical routine and just shoots it, and there's no time, there's no place for that mind to like come in and impact this muscle memory. So I think in some regards, like the things we say to ourselves are to get our brain out of the way, have our brain be occupied so our body can just do what it's been practicing.
The brain is just so unbelievable and impressive that it actually gets in our own way because it
Yeah.
tries to do too much. Exactly. The brain is trying to think too much where we don't need it to be. And all that thinking turns into overthinking and self-doubt and makes us shaky and less accurate. So yes, what I think of when you're talking about just occupy the thoughts is neutral thinking. So neutral thinking might not necessarily be giving you instructional cues of like, oh, shoot like this with this follow through with this kind of body mechanics. Neutral thinking is literally just occupying your mind so that it's not thinking negatively and ineffectively. And I know Riley at RJPG, he loves the idea of singing a song in your
Mhm.
head that you are comfortable with. Because again, it's not going to hurt your focus because you can do this automatically.
Right.
This is a skill that you've done 100 times that you don't need to be trying to think about how to do effectively necessarily. So
Mhm.
singing that song in your head is just going to be preventing thoughts that are going to bring down your chances of success. And another mantra that it's not necessarily neutral thinking, but it's more along those lines than process based mantras is something that can land you in the present moment. And my favorite one, this was literally like the first thing I heard in sports psychology was I have no future nor past, just the moment, and I'm going to make it last. That is
Right.
again a mantra that is occupying your mind and reminding you to be in the present moment where performances are best. Because when that mind is on overdrive and overthinking, we're ruminating about the past or we're anxious about the future. So
Right.
using a mantra to land yourself in the present is very effective to, again, occupy the mind.
I totally agree. Yeah, anything we can be doing at the line to help ourselves be in that present, right? And that's where I think like the routine, like the dribbles, the feel of the ball, right? Like that's all happening in the present moment. And so it just keeps our mind there.